Well, I think, if maybe for folks who aren't in it, they might expect us to say something like a perfect trial, right? A trial with no problems, a trial with no deviations, right? Yes, I've worked on plenty of them. I mean, come on. Um, but honestly, it's the opposite of that.
Melissa, Sarah, so glad to be having this conversation. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for
Glad
having us.
glad to be with you.
Yeah, of course. Now I'll give you a moment to introduce yourselves in a moment, but for the listeners, Melissa and Sarah lead clinical operations over at Annovis, doing really interesting work in Alzheimer's. So excited to dig in here and learn all about how you think about running a best-in-class program in neurology. But maybe Melissa, Sarah, I would love to hear from you first, just a thumbnail sketch of your careers and how you started working in clinops.
Sure. I'm Melissa Gaines. I'm the Senior Vice President of Clinical Operations here at Annovis. I've been here just about 3 years now. And I've been doing clinical research since the mid 90s. And I actually fell into it. It was not my planned career. There are a few professors from my undergrad days that, are laughing that I spent a lot of time in college trying to get out of research classes. My intent was to become a clinician and just ended up with a job as a coordinator. A large pharma liked my work and recruited me to come and run one of their pediatric programs. That was back in the days when the pediatric rule was very much in the forefront, doing pediatric research, and I had some pediatric experience and moved from there to the CRO world. And now I'm here in biotech, and probably 95, 98% of what I have done has been in CNS. That has been my passion, whether it's on the psychiatry side or the neurology side. So that certainly, made Annovis a great fit for me when I decided to join a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get into some of the kind of bits of that journey shortly. But Sarah, we'd love to hand it over to you as well.
Thanks. So I came into ClinOps similarly, like not through a really direct path. I got my first college degree in English literature, and after many years of working different kinds of sales and business jobs, I went back to school for nursing and worked as a nurse on the floor doing direct patient care for a few years, and um, kind of got talked into applying for a research job by a friend who started going down that path. And she said to me, just like, it's your favorite things. It's like talking to patients and documenting things. And I was like, this sounds like a dream come true. So I started out as a site coordinator working in neuro-oncology, and it was such a great experience. And I just kind of continued on that path until, I was recruited to work on the sponsor side for a breast cancer foundation, and I got to see, the clinical operations side of things and knew that was my path forward for the rest of my career. I've never looked back. In between, doing that sponsor-sided job and this sponsor-sided job, I also, did the CRO world for a little while, and so, kind of gone site sponsor and CRO and gotten to see the full picture of what's out there.
Yeah. Now I'm going to throw the highest level question to the two of you to just kind of kick things off here. Um, what does great clinical operations look like?
Well, I think, if maybe for folks who aren't in it, they might expect us to say something like a perfect trial, right? A trial with no problems, a trial with no deviations, right? Yes, I've worked on plenty of them. I mean, come on. Um, but honestly, it's the opposite of that. It's running a trial that has speed bumps, that has road bumps, but a trial that's designed well enough and executed well enough that those road bumps don't become hugely problematic and get in the way of the success of the trial and the ultimate goal of bringing new novel treatments to patients who desperately need them. So I always say when I'm talking to new staff people or I'm talking to sites, I get as nervous, if not more, when there's not a problem somewhere, right? Because that just means there's a problem when we haven't identified it. I can work with a site, with an employee, with a protocol, with a vendor. If I know what the problems are, we can figure out, how do we solve it and best move on. Um, so I think that's sort of my definition is knowing, you know, knowing that whatever is ahead of us, there are going to be road bumps, but knowing how to solve them and minimize and mitigate them through, effective risk management to make sure that when we get to the end, we're good to go.
Yeah. Sarah, you must have hit some speed bumps with Melissa working together for a while because I know you've partnered up for quite some what kind of comes to mind when she talks about speed bumps?
Oh, no, I could keep you here all day. Tell things that come up, but no, I don't like. I think the speed bumps are just part of the expected occurrences when dealing with human beings. In this kind of situation. But no, I think like great clinical operations looks like teamwork and it looks like leadership that empowers people to make decisions. I think those are the two things that keep things running smoothly because like Melissa said, problems will come up and things will go wrong and, supplies won't arrive on time or patient doesn't show up when they're supposed to or, somebody ran out of the right kit to ship the blood specimens, right? Whatever speed bump you can imagine.
Yeah.
But, if the people that are, you know, handling the problems are empowered to make decisions, if they, have great communication and teamwork with all the other parts of the trial, then I think, it all works out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we can write the perfect scientific protocol, right? To a T. We love it. The FDA loves it. Sites love it and feel that they can execute it. But we can't control life, right? We can't control every aspect. And so that's, again, I think to Sarah's point of empowering our vendors, our sites, our patients to be able to do things to make it easy to be compliant is our ultimate goal. But again, still realizing that life is life and we have to work around the challenges that are presented.
Yeah, absolutely. Help me understand maybe just like if we think through the journey of running a trial. Maybe take me through how you think about the kind of journey of running a trial from a clinops perspective and what is critical to get right at each stage.
That's an interesting question. I think um, looking at each stage of a trial, right? You have a trial, and if you look at the whole picture, it can be quite daunting. And there are when you're starting a trial, there are hundreds, thousands of decisions that have to be made, right? From to go back to the example of the protocol, from what word to use in the protocol, and I'll give you an example. Um, sometimes we write, should. Well, you have to question that word, right? Should means they should. We would like them to, but it does not mean we require them to. So you have to look at each of those decisions and is this a should? Is this a must? Right. So, but if you look at the study and you break it down into its life cycle, you have your startup, your enrollment, and then closing down. And so I think when you break it out into those chunks, it makes it a little bit more digestible, to look at what you have to do in each phase and what your goal is of each phase, and then separate things out. I think startup is, of course, probably the most critical, to make sure that you're putting things in place that are going to lead you to success at the end. But I also think probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned along the way is you can't really start without looking at the end and pulling into your early discussions of startup, pulling in folks who might otherwise not have a voice at that part. For example, statistics, right? From a clinical operations perspective, statistics is kind of like, yeah, eventually we'll get there. But if you embrace them from the beginning, because they have an eye that we don't. We have a great statistician that works here with us at Annovis, and I've had some good conversations with her where as we're building the EDC, I'm looking at things from a clinical operations perspective, from a site perspective. How is it going to be handled and managed at the site? And our statistician is looking at what does she need in that system to have a smooth time with the output. And so her comments or any statistician's comments are going to be very different than ours in most cases, because I am not thinking in data sets necessarily. I am thinking in operational execution. So I think those are, again, kind of breaking it down into chunks and really looking to the end at the beginning are two important things. Sarah, what else do you think?
For me, I think it's easy for me to say because this is such a focus for me, but I think choosing the right site partners is with the biggest win or loss that you can make. So if you pick the right partners in the very beginning, startup is smooth, enrollment is smooth, closeout is smooth, your data is good. You really have to work to find the right partners. And we've been really lucky. We found some amazing site partners that have been with us on previous studies that we're working with again. And they're the backbone of our trial. And we really, we have sites that we know they give us amazing data. They find great patients, and they're always ready whenever we're there to monitor them, audit them, whatever we need to do, they're ready. And, that's one of the things that just makes every step of the way so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear a lot about selecting the right sites. I'd love to hear from the two of you. How do you do that? Like, what are you looking for to know that this is going to be a great site for your study?
I can take this because this
Yes,
is really
sure, go ahead.
this is my
Sarah is the site guru at Annovis. That's her nickname.
I got this. I inherited this by accident, and I actually love granola.
Accident?
So
An accident. I don't know, Sarah.
no, I think that's very intentional. Luckily, I really enjoy it. But we obviously want to look for people who have the right training and experience and background. So we're looking for generally neurologists, internists, geriatricians, or psychiatrists who work with Alzheimer's patients already. The same thing when we're doing a Parkinson's study, which we don't have one active now, but we look for people who are experts in movement disorders. So, that's one of the places that we start, whether, sites are reaching out to us saying, if you're starting a new trial, we'd love to be considered, or, we're reaching out to sites that we may have found, through, networks or through clinicaltrials.gov. The first thing I'm going to do is take a look at the proposed investigator's CV and see, what kind of clinical trials they've done, what kind of Alzheimer's studies they've done. I'll look and see if those trials did use the same assessment scales, similar measurements and assessments throughout the study. Um, and then, going from there, we have a pretty rigorous feasibility questionnaire to make sure that everything that we needed would be present on the site. And we also, had a pretty thorough STV process as well, and really encourage and empowered the CRAs to give us a lot of feedback when they would go and conduct those visits. So to let us know, this is what I see that's going great. Like we ask them, please give us an opinion. Like,
Mhm.
you're recommending a site. What are you seeing that you really love? What things might concern you? And we got really great feedback from the CRAs as well.
And I think one of the things that we did specifically with the CRAs is we really focused on sort of follow-up questions and drill down questions. I think, in the feasibility, you're asking, kind of higher level questions about, do you have the basics to do what we're asking you to do? And then at those qualification visits, you ask a site, do you have the population? Oh, yes, yes, we have tons and tons and tons of patients. Well, okay, of Alzheimer's patients. Well, that's great, but we're looking for a very specific subset of those patients. And so, how many have you looked at your database? Have you, how many have the MMSE that range that we're looking for, and really kind of drilling down and giving them permission to say no. Um, you know, and they may not say, oh, to the site directly that they're not going to be chosen. They'll leave that to us, of course. But really understanding and getting their buy-in on what it is that we're looking for, getting them to understand that for a current trial, it's a pivotal trial, and it really is incredibly important for us to get it right. And so giving them that permission upfront that it's okay to say no. Where if we're looking at 150 some sites to yield a 90 to 100 at the end of the day, that can't be every site coming back with a yes. And it's okay for a site to not be the right fit for this particular trial. It doesn't mean they wouldn't be for a trial down the road. It just means for this one they're not the best fit. And you know, and I think and I will say I think this time around I've probably seen more no's and more pushback than I have seen historically. So I was actually pretty pleased with that. And the reasons, that there was pushback were legitimate given the criteria for a trial.
Yeah. I guess like one of the things I'd love to just kind of dig into is what do you think people get wrong? Like, what do you think ClinOps teams maybe get wrong in this process? Because a lot of what we've kind of spoken about, I feel like I've heard uh, at conferences or in
Mm.
other settings, but presumably it's harder than that. So where is it harder than that, and maybe where are some of the kind of tripwires?
I think one of the challenges that I think we could all do a little better, and I know that there are lots of vendors out there who say they can. I think it's the timeline. I think it's always right a race to the finish, right? It's a race to NDA, and so you have two levers, right, that can be pushed and pulled there, time and money. Um, and so you want the right partners, and I think site startup is probably a place where there's still a lot of room for improvement from my perspective, because there's always a lot of back and forth, in terms of getting a site up and running, and some are great at it and some are not, and there are some organizations out there that are great at it, and there are some that are not. And so I think finding setting the right expectation, managing to that expectation, and kind of doing our best to reduce the back and forth, so that we're minimizing timelines to get the study off the ground is something that is always a challenge. And if I'm sure um, many folks who work in ClinOps, will relate to the fact that you get a site that says, "Hey, I haven't heard from so and then you call so and they're saying, "Oh, well, the site hasn't called me or responded to me." So it's always that kind of push pull, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle, probably. But I think for me, I think that's probably um, one place where we can do much better.
Yeah, certainly. Um, it kind of feels like sometimes it's a game of broken telephone.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah,
How do you how do
yeah.
you manage a system of broken telephone? There's so many sites, so many CRAs, like all this. Like, how do you stay on top of it all?
Um,
I personally, probably never stop looking at my email and have, like, a pathological need to respond really quickly. I think, I wish that I could be one of those relaxed kind of people who answer in 1 to 3 business days, but in real life, if I haven't answered you in 1 to 3 business days, it means your email got buried. Like, I feel like I have to answer things so quick, get on top of it. I it's like one of those things that I'm afraid will get away from me, and if I don't stay on top of the communication. Part of that, I think, is working in a small team and knowing that, you know, that the work that I do, Melissa's work depends on it, and, our science team depends on it, and our CRO depends on it, so I don't wanna let the team down, but yeah, that
And I think that there's a particular type of person that gravitates and does well in clinical operations. And I think that person is, um, a little, what I call healthfully OCD. Mm, look, give me a good tracker, I'm a happy girl. Give me a checklist, I'm a happy girl. But I don't think I would never make a great CEO. A CEO is the visionary and looks and connects dots that I would never think to connect. Um, so this is my niche, this is my space, and, across, my own personal timeline, I've contemplated doing other things, but I always come back to this. As crazy as it can be, as stressful as it can be, I love it in this space, and I wouldn't really wanna be doing anything else. I don't know what else I would be doing now, but, it's and part of that, I think, is it's never the same day twice. There are certain tasks, of course, that you have to do over and over, but generally speaking, you just don't know what's going to bubble up from the pot. And so that excitement, I think, is the balance of um sort of the checklist and the tracker girl in me.
you're addicted to the chaos.
Gets to that's what you say, so you to the K. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, there's a bit of dopamine, I think, in solving problems on the fly.
Well,
Yeah.
Hey,
a little
a
bit.
lot of I think a lot of this kind of comes down to uh, building strong relationships with sites. Uh, I'm curious, like, how do you think about that? How do you think about like the kind of maybe even like the longitudinal relationship with sites that you've built?
Well, as I said at the top of the podcast, I've been in this industry a long time, and I have built many, many, relationships that at this point, my gosh, span 20 years, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but they do, and I've built great relationships that are, and that's across kind of the industry. So it's, I know folks that I've worked with or crossed paths with at one time or another that, now are still, some are at sites, some are at big pharma, some are at CROs, some are at varying vendors. Um, and so those relationships can be key when I'm looking for a vendor or looking for a site. I can reach out to folks, and or I somebody new comes across my desk and I see, oh, well, they did this study or they worked at this place, and I'll reach out to some colleagues that might know them to gain some more information. So I do think that a lot of this industry, and I think specifically in CNS, and I understand I'm biased, and the bulk of my career has been in this little niche, but I think it's really, really true in CNS that um that there are just lots and lots of connections and relationships, and the more of those you have, I think the stronger base that you have, and can parlay that into um results or expertise in one way or another.
How do you do site engagement? I feel like it's very easy for maybe the excitement on a study to kind of wane over time. How do you keep sites engaged and excited?
Well, we've actually, just added a member to our team to kinda help with that.
Yeah.
So up until we've just brought this, new team member in, and I'll talk about that in a second. Melissa and I actually, will join SIBs and, you know and just encourage sites to reach out and ask us questions if they need to. We definitely try to make ourselves available, obviously not as their first line of contact. Sites' first line of contact should be their CRAs, but we want to never have them feeling like if they have a participant sitting in a chair waiting to be treated and they have a problem or a question, that they don't have somewhere to go. So I think that's one way that we like to help engagement. We like to shout out randomizations in real time, and thank our sites. I mean, we know that they're putting in a ton of work to get to that point. There's a lot of steps in screening. There's a lot of work to do, and it means a lot to us because this trial is our whole world right now. So that's really important. And then we've realized that Melissa and I have a lot of things on our plates, and so we wanted to find someone to be a dedicated site engagement professional. So we brought on a new team member, Kevin Snell. He is our site engagement lead, and he is an experienced CRA and CRA manager with over 20 years of experience in the industry. And he is going to be kind of the face of Annovis to the sites. So he will get to actually go out and, talk to the sites about their recruitment plans, to help them troubleshoot any problems that they're having with screening and enrollment, and also support the CRAs in their monitoring efforts. So sometimes be an extra set of hands. So, he's going to be really directly involved, and he'll be another resource for sites so that they never feel like they're kind of stranded without help.
Yeah.
And I think too, ClinOps is naturally, the main sponsor face to the sites, but our entire group, from our CEO to our R&D team, is always happy to speak to and engage with the sites. If there is a scientific question, we have, as Sarah said earlier, we have a lot of scales on the study. If there are scales questions, we pull in our R&D team to address those questions. Maria Machicchini, our CEO, she is more than happy always to talk to sites, and she has relationships with several of our PIs as well. So it really is sort of a top-down effort here, and we, will do whatever we can do to support our sites. And so we're a small team. So even though we all sort of have our main lanes, the lines to those lanes are definitely dotted, and we will cross over them as we need to support each other.
Yeah, certainly. Um, what does a great CRA do differently?
Mm, that's a good question. Here's a great CRA understands that being myopic is not the reward that it might show itself to be. And I say that having been a CRA for a long time. And a CRA, what I mean by that, a CRA is rewarded a lot for being myopic, especially in sort of the old way of monitoring before all of the RBQM has come out, where you were monitoring 100% source data verification, data point to data point, data point to data point. So they were rewarded for that focus of looking at the the patient data in that way, making sure that it was as clean as possible with as few queries and errors, right? So that's what we were designed to do at the beginning. Now, as we step back and we look at different ways of monitoring, risk-based monitoring, central monitoring, that focus has to shift. And I speak from personal experience, that shift is a difficult thing for a CRA who, again, has this sort of personality type that is really detail oriented and is good at that. So how do you teach that, or how do you have that inside of you to then learn basically a new skill, right? And look at the whole picture. And so I think CRAs that can do that can be myopic when they need to be, to look from data point to data point, but can also step out of that and look across the site and look at the processes and look at um, how the site works as a whole, to perhaps to assess compliance, whether it's with the protocol or whether it's a GCP, um, is really kind of where I see CRAs that stand out, who will will look at something and they will say, "Oh, I've noticed," and then speak up. I think sometimes CRAs don't feel empowered to speak up and say, "Oh, I've noticed this at this site and this site. Maybe we should look and see, we can have the statistician or we can have the central monitor look to see if there's an outlier, if this is a trend." So I think as as the landscape evolves in terms of technology and how we're monitoring, I think the CRAs have to evolve as well.
Yeah. If you could like wave a magic wand and change anything about how you engage with sites, where would you like to see that all go?
Well, for me right now, I would like to make the contract process way easier.
Okay, yeah.
Only because I'm mired in that moment. So that's very
They're all done.
biased answer. So I'm gonna punt this question to Sarah.
Oh my goodness. So I guess if I were changing anything about the way we engage the site, I would just, I guess, love to like have some kind of um way to fully know if someone was understanding my message every time that I was emailing. I swear sometimes like you think that you've written the most perfectly worded flawless email and then you find out that it was the message was not understood and I wish that I had some kind of way to measure understanding from my communication so I don't know I have to say we've been very very lucky in the relationships that we've had with sites. We're really lucky in the partnerships we built and I'm really excited about the new partnerships we've found. um, in general, the site engagement has been absolutely fantastic. Once our sites are activated, they're hitting the ground running with screening, and they seem to be very, very passionate about this. And the questions that we're getting back have been really smart. Like, sites are always going to have questions about how we're doing things. And I'm actually often really impressed with the questions that are coming back. We had one today where a site was asking questions about the necessity of fasting safety labs. And Cheng Feng, our head of R&D, and I were having this conversation, I was looking at it from the nursing angle. She was looking at it from the science and data perspective. And we were like, no, could we, change this so that we don't have to have these patients fasting? And it was said like, nobody's really questioned that over multiple trials. And it was a really fascinating exercise. The answer was we still do need to keep them fasting. But we definitely went through the entire, mental exercise of, could we change this? Do we want to change this? Is there any benefit to changing this or not changing this? And I've been very impressed with what's coming back from sites. So I think we've been really, really lucky. Yeah, in the relationship we have.
Where do you find these sites?
A variety of sources. So I would say probably 60% of them reach out to us cold. They find us through clinicaltrials.gov. They find us through, other sites that they have relationships with, or they, search for companies doing research in CNS and they will cold email me. Um,
Wow.
yeah, no, I mean, it is sometimes a staggering amount of email. And so if any of our site partners watch this, I just want you to know that if I've ever given you a brief and abrupt answer to an email, cold email, it's not because I don't love you. It's because I work so many of them a day. But a lot of our sites come to us through different partnerships that we have, relationships within the industry. And then there are a lot of times when I'm looking in a specific geographic area that I will go to clinicaltrials.gov and use that as a resource. I look for, studies that have similar assessments, similar endpoints, similar drug to what we're doing. And I will look for sites in the area that I'm looking at or that, I need to find, experienced sites in. And that has been really, really helpful. Because sometimes, we just don't have any connections in a certain state or a certain region of of the United States. And, um, if you just kind of start Googling around, you're not going to find out, if the people that you're reaching out to
Yeah.
have the experience that you need.
Yeah. Now let's call a spade a spade. Not every site works out on a study. How do you deal with underperformance?
Well, you're right. They all don't. We wish they did, but they don't. Um, and I,
Plan for it, but
we
yep.
we do, of course, we do. And I've personally had to do everything on the spectrum from having a call, giving them a little pep talk, perhaps giving them a little kick in the pants, perhaps. Unfortunately, all the way up to reporting for fraud and misconduct. And that is not something we ever want to do. That is not something that if we had any inkling during the qualification process, obviously we wouldn't have selected them. But, you know, at the end of the day, we have to protect our patients and we have to make sure um that their safety is paramount. And sometimes that's what needs to be done. So, I think that there are varying things we've had retrainings, um, we've done reinitiation visits or initiation visit refreshers, for sites. Um, you know, we'll have vendors do retraining with them if it's something, specific to a vendor. Um, and you never wanna get to the point that you have to put them on a screening hold or terminate their ability to enroll or continue to see patients. But unfortunately, that happens, and, luckily, it's definitely the exception, not the rule, but you have to be prepared to do that, and, um, you know, s those hard conversations aren't pleasant, so, but they're sometimes necessary.
Yeah, I think as much as we can, we try to support and coach and retrain or whatever it takes. We generally want to maintain, the site, maintain the patients, maintain the data, but you know, keep the relationships. It's you know, as much as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see we've had sites that really weren't, didn't do well for whatever particular parameter it was, and we coached and remediated and got them on track, and they did well.
Mm.
And that's always, the hope and the goal and what we try to do. Um, it's as I said, it's a continuum, and we don't ever want to start with, oh well, we're going to shut you down. Let's figure out what we can do in the interim. So um, we like to take sort of you know, um, a strong but fair process to, get them to deliver in the way that we need them to deliver and
Sure.
take
And
it from there.
I like I can only imagine that there's a whole toolkit of remediation before you talk about shutting a site down. Um,
There
what
should be.
what can I
Yes, there should be.
tell me about the playbook?
Well, it really depends on what the issue is.
Yeah.
It's a very different. There's a very different plan for remediation if it's someone doing an assessment skill improperly. Uh, that's a very different one than we found that you're enrolling ineligible patients. So there's very different. It's a very different flow chart. But yeah, I mean, it definitely starts with a conversation. It starts with getting all the perspectives. So, when you find a problem, you're usually finding it out from the CRO, the CRA or the project manager or somebody who's been, at the site involved, like it and seen what's going on. So you get that perspective. And then you have to go back and get the site's perspective and kind of learn what they're doing. And then you have to do a little more digging to get kind of the story that's in between, and, as much close to the truth as you can, and then go from there and take the steps that are appropriate. I would say most cases where, you have to get involved, it's mistakes made out of ignorance, not out of, malicious intent, and so, we wanna educate and redirect.
And I think, we always wanna hear every side, as Sarah said. We don't just wanna hear something from the CRA, the PM, without hearing, the site side of it, because there's always, two sides to a pancake, as they say. And then if we need to, if we maybe can't figure out exactly what's happening, or where the right um, balance of what happened is, we have um, folks who'll go in and audit, um, and because I think, auditing is a little bit different than monitoring, obviously. As I said earlier, monitoring is, can be data point to data point, a little bit myopic, and auditing is sort of the bigger picture strategy, um, looking at how the whole site functions, not just looking at a particular patient. So I think that often gives us a different, or a much more objective and perhaps different take than we see otherwise. And sometimes that audit confirms what we think, unfortunately, and sometimes that audit says, no, 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 this is, maybe was a one-off, or doesn't seem to be, you know, um, affecting the whole site. Maybe it's just a particular individual. So that's certainly a really useful tool in our toolbox as well. And sometimes that objectivity is really what's needed, because we get to know these sites, we get to work with them, and sometimes, just because we're human, things can, be cloudy. Um, and so bringing an auditor in really can be very helpful.
Certainly. Now, maybe the last topic I want to throw your way is you're doing research in neurology and Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
What is uniquely hard about working in Alzheimer's?
Well, I think the vulnerability of the patients is probably the thing that is top of mind for us, and making sure that we keep them safe, treat them with dignity. Again, have the right sites who understand that population, and I think that goes to what Sarah said earlier about sort of the qualifications that we look for in our PIs, at certain times, um, depending upon their level of functioning. They may require a legally authorized representative to be involved. Um, Our current study requires that they have a study partner to come with them, and in support of them, and also to provide some feedback at each visit. Sarah, what else?
Well, that was actually what I had in mind was that, I mean, obviously, yeah, this is a really, like you said, vulnerable population, and it's really tough. I think the two things that are tricky are, and actually this is a site that brought this up, and I thought it was really well put that like it makes these folks so sad to hear that their memory is too far gone to join the trial, because our trial is in early Alzheimer's, and that is a really, tough
Uh-huh.
and, tender piece of information to deliver somebody who's already, feeling like things are slipping away. So that's really tough and kind of a unique challenge to Alzheimer's. And then the other big challenge that springs to mind is, coordinating with a study partner. So on some trials, you could bring, a plethora of different people in your family or your friends or whatever to be there to support you. But we actually have to have the same study partner throughout the study, because we get quality of life measures from that study partner. So it's really, really important in our trial to have the same study partner present. And so that does present challenges. When we've tried to control for that as much as we can by spacing out the visits in the trial a little bit farther than we have in the past, and we have a week window on either side of those visits to kind of account for life, vacations, whatever comes up. But it does provide a really big challenge for just the logistics of schedule. So it is tricky, but I think it's also you know a really big ask for those people too. It's a commitment. I mean, they're committing to an 18-month trial just as much as the participant is. And so, we try to make sure that we are, treating with them with the same respect, having them also sign. I mean, obviously they're also signing a consent, but they're also, you know, receiving a stipend for their visits because we want them to understand that we really value their contribution.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you design the kind of patient and site support processes around that?
For study partners,
Yeah.
I don't know that we have a lot of formal support in place. I think that's a really interesting consideration. Generally, we rely on the sites to provide most of the study partner support. What we do is we act in a way that, we empower those decisions that the sites need to make about shifting visits, rescheduling. You know, we help them kind of make those judgment calls of like study partner can't come in, and patients due for their visit on July 1st, what do we go an extra day out a window to accommodate their schedule or how do we work around this? And so we provide that kind of support. But yeah, we really rely on our site partners to do most of the heavy lifting with the study partner support.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, hey, I know we're getting close to the end here. Um, maybe as a closing question, I'd love to kind of hear your take. Any kind of advice for folks that are thinking about getting into clinical operations, maybe accidentally? Uh,
Well, I think one of the great things in the industry now is that you can get degrees in clinical research, and kind of get a little bit of exposure. I think back in the day, it wasn't quite that way, but if you do find, I think, like I said, if you are, um, very detail oriented, love a tracker, love a checklist, um, and embrace the chaos. Um, then I think this is a really great career. It's very rewarding. Um, I have had, definitely, more benefit than not being, in this profession, and I would recommend it to pretty much anyone. It definitely isn't, a clock in at 9 and clock out at 5. There are days where, yes, okay, maybe you can get away with that, but it is definitely something that, as Sarah said earlier, you're checking here, you're checking there to make sure that, nothing is on fire or, um that everything is moving along as it should. But, I think it's really exciting, um, and, hats off to anybody who wants to walk down this path.
Certainly.
I would say that I would echo Melissa's statement that it's a great career and I love it. It is for people who love the chaos. But I would say if you're gonna be in ClinOps, you need to get really comfortable making a decision. Think it's really scary for people sometimes when they're new to this business, to make a decision on their own without a stamp of approval from somebody higher up the chain.
Hmm.
And if you wait for everybody to give their opinion on something, you are going to often find yourself in trouble. Now, there's lots of scenarios where you have the luxury of time and you are able to wait for everybody's opinions. But real, in those situations where the patient is sitting in the chair waiting to, get randomized, then cannot wait to check the, opinion of everybody, that involved in the trial. You gotta be comfortable making a decision.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the scariest things when you first start out.
And I think if I could give one piece of advice to somebody who's new, I would say speak up. Don't be afraid to ask a question. There really is no such thing as a stupid question. I really don't believe that. I think if you have that question, somebody else somewhere has that question too, and they're just afraid to speak up. So definitely speak up, and don't be afraid to take a risk and say something. You may be right, you may be wrong. That's not the point. Find your voice and speak up, and I think that will bring more satisfaction to your career because you learn to take risks, you learn to accept risks, you learn to to figure out where that line is, right, of where you will and won't, you know, what your threshold is to assume risk. But that's how you learn and grow, and in my opinion, I think kind of, you know, move along in this career path.
Yeah, certainly. Well, Melissa, Sarah, I want to thank you again for taking the time to have this conversation. I've so enjoyed it um, and learning from the two of you.
Thanks, Brenda. We really appreciate it too. You made it a really great. This was my first podcast, so it was a really great experience. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much.
Of course.